Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and back again with another Simon Says Stamp STAMPtember exclusive. So I will get to that set in a minute. I decided to create a watercolor background for my card. So I started with some Strathmore ready cut watercolor paper. This is just cold press watercolor paper that's already been cut down to 5x7. So I just taped that down to my hardboard with some painter's tape. I didn't bother cutting it down or anything because that way it gives me a large enough piece that I can then selectively cut down a bit for my card front. And then I pulled out my Mijello Mission Gold watercolors because I hadn't used those in a while, and I actually had them out earlier today. I was just looking at them. And so they were kind of like in the forefront of my mind. So I was like, ooh, I haven't used these in a while. So pulled those out. I wet the watercolor paper first just with clean water, and I'm just using Tonic brushes here, and I started with the wide flat brush, and then I was using a smaller brush to kind of pick up the color, but I was finding that I wasn't getting as much coverage as I wanted with a smaller brush, and this is a little bit of a larger piece than what I normally work on, and I really wanted to just cover this with color. No rhyme or reason other than I wanted blues and purples and kind of like that pinky purple sort of color. So I just kind of swirled that all over my background and then dried it with my heat tool. And it's always kind of amazing how intense it looks. Most watercolor, if you aren't familiar with it, dries back a lot later than it looks when it's wet. So that's always why I tell people, like, just keep going with it. You know, everything always looks different after a while, especially watercolor. After it dries, it looks completely different. So with this, because it dries back so much, I knew I was going to add a second layer. So I kind of kept the same, like tried to apply the colors over the same areas, but at the same time I didn't really worry about it because I'm sticking within very like colors, you know, the blue, the purple, and the pink, and they all kind of mix together to create more purple. So I just added a whole bunch more color. That one area there, I kind of removed a bit more and added a bit more of the pinky color just to really fill this background. I wanted it a lot more vibrant. The idea originally was I would just have I just wanted these pretty colors, you know, as the background of my card. But then after it was all completely dry, I decided to add a bit of splatter, and I was like, ooh, this almost, in a way, this is almost like a galaxy or a night sky sort of background. Just very, very pretty. I was like, I need to maybe experiment with some other colors rather than, you know, cover everything with black and do galaxy backgrounds. So I pulled out some Perfect Pearl powder, and I just added some water to that just to, you know, make a nice shimmery little mixture here. And I splattered this onto the background and really love how that looked. Nothing too crazy, but it does give it, you know, that little splatter effect. It gives it some shimmer. And then I let that dry as well. And then I'm just going to peel my tape here. And I'm not too concerned about the tape because, like I said, I'm going to cut this down. But the tape came off, you know, perfectly. And then I was like, ooh, I almost want to keep this. I need to do more of these. I was really happy with how it turned out. The colors, I think, were just really making me happy. So I did trim this down. And at first, I trimmed it down to 4¼ by 5½. So full A2 card front. And I'm going to end up trimming down more later. But I wanted, you know, to still have the option because I wasn't sure if I was going to maybe die cut it or what. And then I'm using the Joy of the Season. This is the Gina K Designs collaboration set with Simon Says Stamp for STAMPtember. Just like the other collaboration sets, these are only available during STAMPtember while supplies last. So if you're interested in them, I recommend getting them ASAP because once they're sold out, they're gone. This is a big set. This is a 6x8 set. And this row of tree stamp is huge for one. And this is what kind of really got me thinking. I was originally gonna like heat emboss these, like there's so many things. I was like, ooh, these look gorgeous stamped in greens, you know, do a whole background. And then I was like, oh, these would look great. Heat emboss, you know, with metallic embossing powders, that would look amazing. And then I was like, ooh, stamping these over top of a background like this in black, so they look like a silhouette. I was like, oh yes. So I'm using my stamp platform, and because this watercolor paper is a little bit textured, I had to stamp it a few times with VersaFine ONYX black ink. And then I did seal this. I get asked a lot if I seal a lot of different things I, you know, work on for cards. 99% of the time, no. I would mention it if I did, but I just don't bother. It doesn't even really matter what I'm using and whether or not it rubs off in your hands. I just don't bother with sealing things. It's just not something I do. But for this specific card and what I wanted to do, I thought it'd be better to seal it. So I sprayed a matte sealer over it. You can pick these up, I think I'd picked mine up at Walmart, I think. I'm not sure, but I'll link to one that's similar. But I sealed it because I wanted to apply embossing paste over this, and I did not want the embossing paste absorbing any of the watercolor at all. Chances were kind of slim once everything is dry, but I still didn't want this tinted because I wanted it to stay completely white. Because I'm using the Falling Snow stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm using the Aleene's snow embossing paste. There's actually a bit of glitter in this paste. You could use just a regular white embossing paste, would work great too, but this one does have a little bit of glitter. It's really pretty. And yeah, I wanted to keep it super white because it looks like snow. So that's why I did the sealing before that, and then applied that embossing paste over the stencil, let that dry, and then I ended up trimming this down to about 4 inches by 5 1/4. And the whole idea, again, behind this card was I was going to use the trees, but it was the sentiment in the stamp set that got me thinking about snow. And I was like, oh, how pretty would that look to have it falling among the trees? So I did that. And then I wanted to add a little bit of bling. So I die cut some of Simon's glitter cardstock. I used the largest of their basic rectangles die, which is A2 sized. And then I just used a smaller one to cut out the center because you don't need it. You're only going to see the outer edge of this, and because glitter paper, you don't get as much of it, and I like to conserve it because I use it for die cutting and little strips and all that stuff. So I cut out the center of this, but you could also do that with like pattern papers, or if you don't have very much colored cardstock, etc. Like cut out the centers of your layers because you won't see them. So I adhered that glitter cardstock to my card base, and then I popped that watercolor background on with some Simon Big Mama foam tape. And then my original plan was to heat emboss the sentiment either onto black cardstock, or I was thinking pink would look really pretty with this card. And then in the end decided to go with vellum. So I am white heat embossing the sentiment from this Joy of the Season stamp set. And it says, kindness is like snow, it beautifies everything it touches. And that literally was what kind of inspired, like made this card take the route that it took. So I melted the embossing powder with my heat tool on the vellum. And then I die cut the vellum with what else but the new Sentiment Labels dies from Simon's STAMPtember release. And if I was to redo this card, I would have adhered the vellum strip before adhering that watercolor panel to the card base. But like I said, I was going to do cardstock. So I had to really very carefully peel up the sides a little bit with the foam tape, which was risky because you could tear everything. And the Big Mama foam tape is super, like once it's down, it is down. So I very carefully peeled that up and reapplied it. And then yeah, if I was to ever redo this, I would totally adhere that vellum strip, then adhere that to my card base, and it'd be so much easier. So I still had those trees in my stamp platform here. So I just have the card open, and I am going to stamp the trees with Dusty Concord Distress Oxide ink. So it's stamp one section of it, and then I'm going to just move my card base over because the trees are slightly narrow. The whole stamp itself is slightly narrower than 4 1/4, and I wanted it to go across the entire inside of the card. So I just stamped it once, and then I'm just going to move my card base over to the other side and then kind of line it up again, and then just stamp the trees again. So then I have a nice little row of these trees. And FYI, if you don't have the Dusty Concord Distress Oxide ink, it's gorgeous. It's so pretty. So anywho, stamp the trees, and then I pulled out the Merry Christmas sentiment from this Joy of the Season stamp set, and I'm going to ink that up with the VersaFine ONYX Black and stamp that on the inside of the card, and that's going to finish off my card. So I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to all the supplies used. I'll have info on the STAMPtember releases and the exclusivity and all that kind of stuff. That will be in my blog post as well. So check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!